It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning, everyone. We have NPR's national politics correspondent, senior national politics correspondent, Liasson, standing by as our first guest today with some really big things in national politics developing right now, like the effects of the Iran war versus the effects of the redistricting wars on who will hold power in the United States the next 2 years. The inflation report just out this morning turns out to add a lot to that narrative. We'll give you the details. So does the latest NPR PBS Marist poll about the president and his party's approval ratings and relative to the Democrats. But can the Republicans, with the help of the Supreme Court, you might say, redistrict their way out of their unpopularity? And is that what democracy looks like? But before we bring Mara on, I want to do my duty here and let you know that today we begin our annual spring membership drive. So thank you in advance to everyone who will contribute to keep WNYC viable and strong in the coming days in the post-federal funding era. I'll tell you right off the bat that we'll try to have some fun this week, even as we take care of business. We'll have a 10-question quiz each day, like we've been doing in recent drives, with prizes if you get 2 in a row right. We'll kick it off today with a numbers in the news 10-question quiz, and the first question will be so easy that I'll give you the answer in advance. It's 250. Can you figure out the question just from that? The number 250. We'll do it for real in a little while. I'll also tell you right off the bat, also on the fun side, that we've brought back a favorite thank you gift from a few years ago, just in time for spring and summer weather. It's the 1960s themed Peace, Love, and Brian Lehrer t-shirt, the retro tie-dye t-shirt that will bring a smile to your face, I think, and to those of the people who see you in it. We'll be giving them away as prizes in those quiz segments, and of course we have them as thank you gifts ready to go for as many donors as want one. I'll remind you briefly before we start with Mara that the context for this drive is one you already know, that I won't say a zillion times because it would get boring, but you know it, and it's still very real and defining. It's the new hole that President Trump and Congress dug for us last year when they ended all funding for public media. Around $3 million a year of that was funding for WNYC. They would love to see us just go away, but we have no plans to do that. And I'll just say briefly for now that we have an extremely generous First Day Challenge grant from the Kaplan Brothers Fund, a foundation that has supported our journalism a lot. They are now offering $100,000 all or nothing challenge. They will give the station $100,000 if we can get 1,000 of you to become sustaining members of WNYC for the first time, or to upgrade your sustaining membership by $3 a month. Deadline 7 o'clock this evening, so thank you all in advance for helping to meet that goal. You can do that at WNYC.org, right on the homepage, or call 888-376 WNYC, 888-376-9692. Many of you who do the +3 will be able to choose the Peace, Love, and Brian Lehrer t-shirt or another thank you gift, but with whatever thank you gift or none at all, thank you all for helping us to get this big $100,000 gift from the Kaplan Brothers Fund with your small increase or first-time small sustaining membership at 888-376 WNYC, 888-376-9692, or right from the homepage at WNYC.org. Thank you all so much as we kick off the drive with federal funding only a memory now. Now, NPR's senior national political correspondent, Mara Liasson, is with us. Mara, we always appreciate your analysis on the network. Thanks for some WNYC time for our listeners today. Welcome back to WNYC. And we may be having a little line problem with Mara, but let's see. We're going to begin with the newest revelation this morning, or the newest relevant news this morning, relevant to the politics, and I guess it's a revelation. The April inflation report just came out at 8:30, the Consumer Price Index. I think Americans don't need a government statistic to tell them what their lives are costing right now, but there it was, an annual rate of 3.8%. The New York Times lead on this, that came out just a little while ago, says inflation shot up at a 3.8% rate. The Wall Street Journal headline says inflation soared. Mara, are you there? Not quite. Okay. So listeners, you know what I'm going to do, and forgive me for this, but I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that challenge grant. The Kaplan brothers folks, and I was privileged to know Lex Kaplan, who was a member of our board of trustees. He passed away a few years ago, but he was very committed to journalism in the public interest, and now there's the Kaplan Brothers Fund. And their thing is, with this challenge grant, before they give us that much money all at once, $100,000, they want to know that our not-for-profit journalism and shows like this mean enough to enough people. So that's the ask. If you're a sustaining member of WNYC, we're asking you to increase your monthly amount by $3 a month, and that will count toward the challenge. Or if you're a regular listener to this show or other things on WNYC, but not yet a sustaining member, thank you for becoming one and showing the Kaplan brothers that. And of course, that will count toward the challenge. We need a total of 1,000 people to do one thing or the other by 7 o'clock tonight. So thank you all for considering it and helping us get this big gift from them, really earning this big gift from them, which obviously will do a lot to close the hole that federal funding cutoff left us with. All right, we have Mara now, I think. Mara, you there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Good. Yes, I can hear you. I was just saying that the New York Times lead on this inflation report says it shot up at 3.8% as an annual rate. The Wall Street Journal headline uses the word soared. How do you see the political context of this right now?
Well, I see this as the most significant economic indicator. It's the one that voters understand every single day. They know what gas prices are because they're in giant letters in front of every gas station. And inflation jumping up by 3.8% is a really big jump. And finally, the chickens have come home to roost. The cost of the war on gas prices, the cost of the tariffs, at least the ones that are still in effect. So I think this matters a lot. I mean, inflation is one of the most important political indicators. And let me just make that even more specific. It's not really the rate of inflation that voters pay attention to. It's prices. Prices are up. It's what they have to pay every day. So that's a bad thing for the incumbent party, bad thing for Republicans.
And this comes in the context of the Iran war's impact on prices, of course. The NPR PBS Marist poll that came out last week found that 60% of Americans disapprove of how President Trump is handling the war. That's up from a 54% disapproval rate in March. Just 33% approve of how he's handling Iran. Also, 61% of Americans, including 25% of Republicans, say U.S. military action in Iran has done more harm than good. So my question for you, Mara, do you think U.S. public opinion is giving Iran more leverage to thumb their noses at Trump as they resist his demands and negotiations between the two countries? Do you do international political analysis enough to have a take on that?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if I'd go that far that Iran decides that because the war is unpopular in the U.S. I think it certainly adds to their defiance. I think they'd be defiant anyway. I think what they've learned is they would say to themselves, we can close the Strait of Hormuz. We have a lot of cards to play. We have leverage, and they're using it. And don't forget, this is a country that's run by people who are religious fundamentalists who believe if they die, they go to paradise. And this is an existential war for them. It's certainly not for us. We're thousands of miles away.
So now the reports are that Trump is considering ending the temporary ceasefire and going all in on the war again, maybe to try to open the Strait of Hormuz by force. But, you know, we had a military analyst on the show recently who said that would probably take a ground invasion because that's where Iran shoots missiles from, at ships in the Strait. And again, I'm curious if you see a political as well as military calculation taking place over that.
Well, I think that Trump has threatened this before, and he hasn't followed through. And it seems as if he really, really wants this war to end. That's why he's allowed the ceasefire, which has been broken almost every single day, to continue as long as it has. He's made big threats before, bombing Iran back to the Stone Age, ending their civilization, etc. So I think the political calculation for Trump is the war is hurting him and his party at home. He'd like it to end, but he's put himself in a box because his goals for the war have not been met. He said he wants to stop Iran from ever having a nuclear weapon. He wants them to agree to that. He wants them to stop enriching uranium. They haven't agreed to that. He wants to have them open the Strait of Hormuz. I mean, there are a whole, but now he has accomplished some objectives. He has weakened Iran's military considerably, but he hasn't achieved the big one, so he's stuck.
Yeah, and I saw political speculation on TV this morning that said all Iran has to do is capture one U.S. troop, this is a hypothetical, to hold as a hostage, and we've got a whole new level of likely unpopularity for Trump and the war. And beyond just the war, the NPR story on its Marist poll said they found Trump is more unpopular than he has ever been, in general, at just 37% approval, and he faces major declines with key groups since being sworn in for a second term. My question to you is, does this matter to anything, assuming he himself is not ever going to be on the ballot again, or at least not this fall for the midterms?
Well, because he's not on the ballot, he is much freer in what he can do and wants to do in the Iran war. On the other hand, it matters to Republicans. I mean, this is an albatross around their necks. I mean, Trump is such a dominant political figure. He's going to count in a lot of these races. Now, we can start talking about the midterms and all the factors that affect that, but Republicans don't want to go into a midterm where the president and the leader of their party, who has an iron grip on their party, as we saw in the Indiana primaries recently, where almost every single one of Trump's candidates that he supported won. That's not a good place to be for incumbents. They do have a lot of advantages. We can talk about them later. But an unpopular war, an unpopular president is not good for the incumbent party.
Right. And the poll also found Democrats with a 10-point advantage on which party Americans would rather control Congress, 52% to 42%. But that brings us to the redistricting wars. The Republicans are scoring some very big victories on that front. That election in Indiana that you just referenced is an example of that. And the Supreme Court gutting the Voting Rights Act, making Republican power grabs easier across the South. Meanwhile, the Virginia Supreme Court throwing out the Democrats trying to grab more congressional seats with a new map there. Are you keeping score enough to say how much the midterm math has changed in the last 2 weeks?
I think that the midterm math has gotten harder for Democrats, but they're still favored, I think. I don't see a big, giant Democratic wave, but they're still favored to take the House back, maybe just by the skin of their teeth. But the way I look at the midterms is there are two competing forces. One of them is structural, and that's the redistricting. That favors Republicans, especially since the Virginia State Supreme Court ruling and the U.S. Supreme Court ruling. Money, that favors Republicans. That's a structural advantage. They have, in the past, it usually doesn't matter if one side has a little bit more money than the other, so long as both sides have enough to compete. But this time, the Republicans, including all the campaign committees, have something like 7 times more than the Democratic equivalent. Individual Democratic candidates are raising a lot. But on the other side, the opposing forces, all of the organic things that we have learned in the past help a party, like motivation. Democratic voters seem to be more motivated. The economy is bad. Prices are high. That's bad for the incumbent party, better for challengers. So we're going to see which force wins out in the midterms. But right now, I would say the road to taking over the House got more difficult for Democrats, not impossible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty weird moment. It's like, can the Republicans, with the help of the Supreme Court, redistrict their way out of their unpopularity? And is that what democracy looks like? So do you think we could wind up in November with polls that still show more Americans would like Democrats to control Congress, but the Republicans actually win more seats?
Sure, absolutely. I mean, absolutely. That's the story of America, because we don't elect a House of Representatives by national popular vote. We do it district by district. That gives real estate a little bit more power than human beings. We can talk about this. Democrats in general, Democratic voters are inefficiently distributed. They're clustered in metro areas and on the coast. Republican voters, for the purposes of winning House seats, are sprinkled more efficiently throughout the heartland. So, yeah, I can see that. We've had many cases in states where the statewide popular vote for Congress or state legislature, Republicans can get less than 50% of that, but still end up with the vast majority of seats. We've seen that in several states. So, yes, you can have a national popular vote poll, in other words, show one preference, but the result can be the opposite way.
We have a few more minutes with NPR senior national political correspondent Mara Liasson. Another thing I see you talked about in the NPR Politics podcast the other day is how the Trump administration is undermining, the story used the word undermining, the fight against public corruption. And this was based on reporting, of course, by your NPR colleague, Ryan Lucas, who covers the Justice Department, on the pardons Trump is giving out versus the people the Justice Department is politically prosecuting. You called it a rule of one guy versus the rule of law approach. What specifically were you and Ryan looking at there?
Well, what Ryan was looking at was the kind of, I don't know what we want to call it, defenestration or depopulation of the departments in the Department of Justice that prosecute and investigate public corruption. We also know that Trump has fired a lot of the inspectors general in different cabinet departments. Those are the ones who look for fraud and waste and abuse and corruption. And Donald Trump has been very explicit about this. He hasn't hidden it. He's told the Department of Justice that he wants them to go after his political enemies and accuse them of corruption. He doesn't believe that someone who commits a crime on his behalf should be punished. One of the first things he did when he came into office was to pardon the, 1,500 or so January 6th convicted protesters. So he has a very clear idea about public corruption. Corruption is something that his enemies do, and his team doesn't.
And that's about who gets criminally investigated or pardoned. James Comey, they're trying another way to get him now that legal analysts don't think is going to fly any more than the first way. But another thing in the news that could be seen through the public corruption lens is the claim that the president's East Wing ballroom would be paid for with private dollars. So who's donating to that and what they want from government? But also now on the revelation that Trump is asking Congress for $1 billion of taxpayer money for what he's calling security for the ballroom. And I see some Republicans are denouncing that. But do you think that could break through as a big political issue?
Yes, I think it already has broken through. I think this is something that Democrats will use. This will be part of their messaging. He's asking you to pay for his ballroom while you no longer have access to health care. You have to pay too much at the pump. It's too expensive to buy a house. I think that's a simple message. You're going to hear that a lot. He said the ballroom would be paid for by donors, and now, it turns out it's being paid for, at least in part, by taxpayers. So, yes, I think that's already broken through, and you're going to hear about the ballroom ad nauseum because that's something people do understand.
NPR senior political correspondent Mara Liasson, we always appreciate that you come on with us here from time to time. We'll hear you on the network.
Thank you so much.